Australia, known for its many things like famous wide open spaces, world famous nature locations, to its wildlife, and currently in the city of Melbourne, Formula 1. In this upcoming video, we will discuss the history of F1 races in Australia, even going back before the racing was held in Melbourne. So here's the history of the Australian Grand Prix. Let's go back to the 1980s, and specifically 1985. This year saw the addition of the Australian Grand Prix to the F1 calendar, and it would host the final race of the 1985 season. The first ever F1 Australian race would be held at the Adelaide Street Circuit, located in Adelaide. The challenging and tricky circuit to master became very popular with drivers and teams, and the newly added circuit to the calendar proved to be quite a success. The race ended up being very hot, but despite this, Keke Rosberg battled Ayrton Senna for the win, and the Williams driver ended up becoming the first winner of the Australian Grand Prix. Just a year after its debut in F1, Australia would host a championship showdown. The 1986 race saw three different drivers battle for the championship, something we don't get to see in motorsport that often. The title battle was between Nigel Mansell, Nelson Piquet, and Alain Prost. In the race, Nigel Mansell unfortunately suffered a tire issue, which took him out of title contention. This moment was caught on video when the tire failure caused a huge amount of sparks that would ultimately take Mansell out of the race. Eventually, Prost would do what he needed to do to win the 1986 Drivers' Championship. As we head into the 1990s, the 1991 Australian Grand Prix ended up being known for having extreme wet conditions out on track, the complete opposite to the first race in '85. In the race, 14 out of the 82 laps scheduled were completed, and it remained the shortest race in F1 history, all the way up till the 2021 Belgian Grand Prix events. In 1993, it was announced that the Australian Grand Prix would move from Adelaide to Melbourne from 1996 onwards. So that meant that Adelaide would still host F1 races all the way up until 1996, until it switched to a different circuit. Fast forward to the year after this news was announced, to the year 1994, where one of the most memorable F1 championship deciders occurred. It was a fight for the championship between Williams driver Damon Hill and Benetton's Michael Schumacher. The two drivers battled for the lead throughout the race, but on lap 36 at turn 6, Schumacher and Hill collided, sending Schumacher's Benetton up on two wheels as the car went into the wall. Meanwhile, Hill suffered some wishbone suspension damage, which ultimately took him out of title contention and the Grand Prix itself. Because Hill retired, Schumacher was able to win his first of 7 world championships by 1 point to Hill. It finally came time after the 1995 race that F1 would say goodbye to the Adelaide circuit, but would say hello to a new F1 circuit in Melbourne. The 16-turn Albert Park circuit located in Melbourne would host the Australian Grand Prix from 1996 onwards, and still continues to host the Grand Prix to this day. The first race in Melbourne was a success, with a record-breaking amount of spectators attending the event. The Grand Prix was won by Damon Hill, but the race also had a massive crash where Martin Brundle's Jordan launched into the air. The 1996 race was also the first time the Australian Grand Prix held the first race of the season. From then on, the Australian Grand Prix became famous for hosting the first race. Heading into the 2000s, and this upcoming race that I'll speak of is one of F1's most memorable Grand Prix. It was the year 2002, and at the start, we saw a massive crash at turn 1 on lap 1, involving pole sitter Barrichello and Ralf Schumacher. The incident saw the Williams of Schumacher hit the back of the Ferrari and fly up into the air at the first corner. Thankfully, the driver was okay. Another eye-catching moment in the race was local hero Mark Webber driving his Minardi to unexpected points in front of his home crowd. The Australian happy to pick up his first F1 points of his career at his home Grand Prix. A few years later, in 2007, a new driver appeared on the grid, Lewis Hamilton. While that year's champion Kimi Räikkönen grabbed his first win with Ferrari, Lewis also showed his pace by finishing third right behind his teammate Alonso, who had won the championship a year before. In 2009, there was a shock winner of the race. The new Brawn team, who expected to be towards the back, unexpectedly qualified on pole position and finished first and second in the race. This race was just the start for Brawn too, because later in the year, the team would consistently grab wins to take the Drivers' and Constructors' Championship in 2009. For the following year in 2010, it was a very interesting race with many different drivers in the hunt for the win. But as the wet weather started to go away, Jenson Button, who was a master in the wet, pit early onto dries, and while everyone else thought it was too early for the dry tires, Button stayed on these tires, and because he was able to do that, he won the Grand Prix, taking back-to-back victories in Australia. In 2014, it was a completely new era for F1, with Mercedes dominating the entire season, Nico Rosberg eventually winning the first race of the season. But the only other driver to win a race besides the Mercedes drivers was the Australian Daniel Ricciardo, who made his debut with Red Bull at the first race in Australia. Ricciardo showed how quick he was in front of his home crowd, making it up onto the podium in second place. Unfortunately, Ricciardo was disqualified due to an illegal fuel flow. Because of this, Kevin Magnussen was able to get up onto the podium, making his debut in F1 at the very same race. For the following years, the Australian Grand Prix continued to host incredible races. In 2020, the race was scheduled to go ahead, but unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 outbreak, it was cancelled, sending all teams to withdraw from the Grand Prix. But in 2022, Australia will return and surely be an exciting race. Some more great news, as F1 has extended their contract with the Albert Park circuit to extend their stay on the F1 calendar till at least 2025. The Australian Grand Prix is an iconic race and fully deserves a place on the F1 calendar every single year. Ever since its debut in 1985, the Australian Grand Prix is globally known as being part of the F1 calendar, and each year it always delivers some incredible action and racing out on track. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one, and if you'd like to see more content like this, please make sure to subscribe down below, and to the bottom left, you can watch another video right now. So have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.